Our first panelist, Khary Randolph, is a comic book artist who has worked for both Marvel and DC on such titles as Spider-Man, X-Men, and Teen Titans. He has also lent his talent to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Hellboy. Give a round of applause for Mr. Khary Randolph, please. How you doing, Khary? How you doing?
What's good?
What's goody good? Thank you for coming today.
My pleasure. Oh, damn, this came in loud. All right.
I know, right? Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. Next up, Yezzi Yazzir. Yezzi Yazzir is a London-based rapper, songwriter, and podcast. Hey Sis UK, if you know. She has amassed over 10 million views, as well as an award-winning radio personality. What's up, Yezzi? Round of applause, round of applause. Have a seat. Next is, I'll say, he's the triple OG. Triple OG, will you go for that? The triple OG. We have Jake Detonator. Jake Detonator is a native of Hull. He's an artistic talent whose clients include The Guardian, the BBC, Disney, Doctor Who, the Star Wars franchise, as well as the graphic novel Hellraisers. And then you have the Star Wars series, had Chewbacca.
Is this on?
Wookiee, how to speak Wookiee.
Yeah, I did some books. This is good in the back of a taxi. I did a book called How to Speak Wookiee, and you press buttons and it goes. And then we did an R2D2 one.
And then you did the R2D2, and then you did.
And a BB-8 one that. BB-8s. You get the idea.
So here we have our triple OG. Khary, would you say you're an OG? Are you an OG yet? Are you an industry veteran yet? I would say so. We go way back.
You and I go way back.
We go way back.
I don't know about triple OG. I'll take like one OG.
Nah, it is a triple OG here.
I'll take one OG.
That just means I'm older, right?
And I would say, you know, the rookies, you're the rookie on the team, right?
On the come up.
You're the come up.
So
we do have one more panelist who I think is stuck in London crosstown traffic. So Azmera will get introduced when she arrives. But this is our Super Cypher panel for today, y'all. Round of applause. I didn't introduce myself. I like to put myself last. All I will say is I'm Dr. Shamika Mitchell, Associate Professor of English with the State University of New York, Rockland Community College. I'm a member of Women in Comics International, and I'm a comics editor, scholar, and writer. Thank you for coming and joining us today. Now, the title of the panel is Super Cypher. So what do you know about a cipher? What's a cipher? You're going to get in a cipher.
do you want
Khary.
to? You're American.
I mean, the cipher is basically, you know, you get in this circle and you just, either you battle, one person raps, other person raps. When I was in college, when I thought for a second I was going to be a rapper, we had many, many ciphers. But it happens to be that I'm much better at drawing comics than rapping, so I gave that up very quickly. But I was in many ciphers. That won't be happening today. No freestyles.
What about you, Yezzi? What do you know about the cipher?
Yeah, and you know what it is? I can only speak for the England scene, the UK hip-hop scene.
That's totally fine. That's why you're here.
I love it. And ciphers are integral into keeping hip-hop alive, especially if you know about grime. Who knows about grime music here? Yeah, my grime heads, come on. So ciphers are what gets the genre, the subgenre of grime. People get so excited because sometimes you only have 8 bars to go and prove yourself. And if you miss the drop, that's embarrassing. You never want to miss the drop on the grime beat. And it comes so quickly. We're not talking about a 120 BPM, we're talking 140. Oh. There's real skills on that one. So
okay.
Ciphers are make or break for your whole career.
It's definitely different compared to the original, the older ciphers, which, you know, if you think about the battle rap, you know, today where it's like, your shoes are red like blood. And everyone's like, whoa. Bars, right?
You killed me, son.
It was a little different back then, right?
I'm so old, I'm older than hip-hop. right?
Yeah,
You're lying.
Are you? How old are you?
I'm 52.
Okay, I'm
Right?
47.
Literally, I'm just a
so
little bit
I'm
older
getting
than
there.
hip-hop,
I'm
right?
close.
So,
I'm close.
you know, I got into hip hop at junior school. It was like junior school when body popping, breakdancing, first electro. And in the 90s, when people started talking about a cypher, mainly American rappers, when I went to art college, there was a guy he started making beats and selling records to Dre and Q-Tip, and he ended up being a producer. He was called The Creators. They worked with Mos Def. But he was a British guy, and he was my mate. And there was a really iconic UK hip-hop group called Caveman, which if you don't know, you should check out because they're ill. Before grime,
heard of
before
them.
kind of drum and bass, before jungle, like pure UK hip-hop.
Okay.
he
What are
lived-
they called?
Caveman.
Caveman?
And
Okay, I know the Cookie Crew.
and
I'm
the-
from
yeah,
that
yeah.
era, the Cookie
Same
Crew.
era. And the rapper was called MCM, weirdly, right? So we sat in Simon's house. He's on an SP12 making the beats. Julian's scratching. MCM's like freestyling off the top of the dome. I'm sat there in my black book writing graph, and I'm like, I'm in a cypher. I'm from Hull, and I'm in a cypher. Because hip hop was like it's a foreign thing. You're in it when you're a kid, but you're British, so it's this weird. Before grime, it was this weird. You think you're hip hop, but you know you're so far removed. Because you say anything, it sounds hip hop, right?
I mean,
A real live American sounds hip hop.
I suppose, but I mean, I grew up in Boston, which was
Boston.
See now, the New Yorkers in the over here hate Boston for I don't know why they hate us so much. We're really nice people, but you know, I was 4 hours away from New York, so the greatest thing for me was we'd have friends who would take day trips to New York, get mixtapes, get all the Ron G, DJ Clue tapes, and even trips to Staten Island to go to the Woolwear store. So like we were close to New York, but we weren't quite New York. So we got everything like a month later,
And Boston had its own with like Ed O.G. and the Bulldogs and all that. I mean, I love that, you
The
know?
sound I'm
some
talking
gangsta.
about, when I was where MCM's from, High Wycombe.
Yeah.
High Wycombe crew represent. High Wycombe's the least hip-hop sounding place on earth, right? It's a market town. Right? It's the DJ hip-hop in High Wycombe, right? And that's where the creators were, and MCM. Ed O.G.'s just played in a hip-hop cafe in High Wycombe. High Wycombe's,
He did,
it's
yeah.
represented, man.
Yeah.
Tone Cafe, shout out to Tone Cafe, because he's had like Master Race, he's had like Large Professor. It's like a cafe.
Yes.
I don't know how
Yeah,
he
I
does
saw
it.
that.
He's an old school rapper, so I think he just goes, you owe me favors.
One of the things I find to be most fascinating about the Cypher is that it's a collective effort. In the same way that comics and fandom usually get created in a collective effort. I remember from the very beginning seeing a lot of graph culture embedded in some of the things people wind up doing with comics. What do you remember about the way some people started doing graph,
Ask Grandad first.
and then like wound up doing comic strips, or wound up getting into other. I mean, I thought it was Wu-Tang. Wu-Tang shouted out "Fist of the North Star,"
Yeah.
and I remember watching that as a kid back in the early '90s. When we were into anime, it wasn't the thing that it is now. And so I said, you see, we're definitely a part of the anime fandom in hip hop, but people didn't make that connection. I think now they're making the connection more. And so I see little chambers, to get back to like the Wu-Tang reference. I see these chambers of like a lot of graph kids, a lot of B-boys, and a lot of B-girls wind up also playing video games, wind up also, making a comic book character on the side. What is your earliest memory of seeing the two cultures kind of combine? Do you remember?
I would say, I'm just speaking of myself here, I've always loved American television, simply because it's like you get a whole new world. We didn't get really a lot of it in like the early 2000s. So when you see Nickelodeon and you see Disney Channel, you see graffiti being incorporated in shows like That's So Raven, Hey Arnold, Recess. So then when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, hold on. And then you think back, one of the elements of hip hop is the graffiti, is the b-boying, is the DJing. So it all comes in together with it just being more than a genre. It's like, rah, I'm part of a whole culture, and I can subscribe to this. And I don't even have to be American. Like, I can join the party too. Now, this is good.
I mean, it's weird at the beginning, because like I said,
In the beginning.
I'm really fascinated by this. If you think of hip hop as a virus that's infected the entire world, right? A good virus. It changes the daps we're wearing, the way people walk, You know, you've seen your friend with that gangster lean, right? You know, the way people speak, bling is from hip hop. You know, your
Even
mum
the
says
way we
bling.
think. People forget, like, if you see One Piece, I was wearing my One Piece shirt, right? That is a straight hip hop crew. People don't see it that way, but that whole counterculture, fight the establishment, you know, that is a hip hop essential.
Rock and roll was the dominant culture. Hip hop then infects the world and changes typography, graph. So we're at the beginning, there's a book called Subway Art. And I had the pleasure of doing this thing at the British Library. I flew over Martha Cooper, who's the photographer. The first graph book. Yes. Lady Pink, who's the greatest female.
She's a genius. Yeah.
Oh, she was in Wild Style, the first hip-hop film. So I'm doing this thing on stage with them. And it was only then that I realized she couldn't get a book deal in America. She got it through a British publisher. So a load of 8-year-olds in High Wycombe and Hull, where I'm from, saw this book that said Deaf Fresh. It had a glossary of all the terms, how to rock fat laces, how to use a fat cap, how to use a skinny cap. That's where you get German and English b-boys. When they're into hip-hop, to me, is like all 4 elements, right? It's the MCing, it's the b-boying, the dancing, it's the writing on walls or trains. Drake's not hip-hop, he's rap, right? But you know what I mean? I'd divide it. There's hip-hop and there's rap. So we got infected with the virus faster. So Charlie Tuna, one of the rappers I worked for from Jurassic 5, we're on a train chatting about this. He was from Chi-Town, Chicago. He heard about hip-hop about the same time because some kid from New York came to his school. He's like, you're all whack. We all spin on our heads. We write on trains. He was like, what? That's how he heard about it. Where we already had a book and a series of records called Electro, where a British guy had gone to record companies and gone, can I get the Beastie Boys? Can I get Fresh Prince? Can I just put them on an album, like now that's what I call music? Okay. They were going, yeah, 50 quid. They thought, we can't even sell this outside of New York. So British b-boys they got the connection faster than Americans, which is, I've only just worked this out, I want to do a book about it, but it's kind of crazy.
Okay.
So the first connection to me with comics and graffiti is, does anybody know Vaughn Bode? He's like a 70s underground cartoon. It's like transvestite. So it looks like T-Rex. He's covered in makeup and amazing hair. Looks like this 70s rock star.
Oh, okay.
And he drew a character called Cheech Wizard, which is like a yellow wizard's hat with stars and little red legs. It's quite filthy, this cartoon. That's what all the original graph writers were kind of emulating, the bubble letters, and they were putting those characters.
They were.
So Children of the Grave by Dondi is a panel of a little elf, excuse me, going like that. And that
you would see that
the beginning of the
all over the U.S. too. That little tag.
Yeah. And Bode's dope. It's just like amazing underground comics. Bit kind of Lord of the Rings, kind of cartoony, but hip hop kind of sampled it. So that the link between hip hop and graph and the rhyming, it's all there. It's all at the beginning. Because there were 16-year-olds looking at pop culture, right? So they were looking at Voltron. They were looking at, you know.
And they always want to do something that's anti.
Yeah.
And that's what hip-hop was. It started out as like some people it's anti-disco, right? So even now, with like anime rap.
Creating rap music because I never dug disco.
Yeah, it's like, you know, it has its own like chamber.
But it was so DIY. If you think about it, hip-hop comes from, like, that part of New York was, like, so poor at that point. I mean, Hull was poor, but, like, New York was broke, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were bankrupt.
And it's kids with no money. So kids with no money don't necessarily go to art galleries. So
right.
It's like they're sucking up the stuff that they see around them.
I think I've thought about this a lot, and I feel like that was why comics were so accessible to me and my generation, was because comics were a very cheap form of entertainment.
Yeah.
And you would see it, like, all of my favorite rappers, like Wu-Tang would sprinkle comic book references.
All the time.
They've all got the pseudonyms, haven't they? It's like Johnny,
Schoolie D,
Johnny DeBlaze.
Spoonie G, all of them.
Voltron crew, like, it was all right there. So that was the culture, and it couldn't help but seep into the music.
Well, how did it affect your art style? Because your art style, the first time we met was like, 2011? Like once upon a time, long ago. And I remember looking at it saying it reminded me of like the graph artists. So did you have a secret graph career?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Like I was never good at actual tagging up, pieces. Like
Okay.
I had
It's
no
against the
control
law.
of the
I
pens.
wouldn't expect you to be good at that. You can't do that.
I tried a couple times, but it didn't go well. But what I would do was I would create drawings in my sketchbooks and then give it to the graph writers, and they would throw that stuff up. So I would do graph by proxy almost.
You
know what I'm
just
saying?
didn't do the hard work stuff.
Yeah, I was like,
you didn't get
y'all
the
get in
poison.
trouble, but I'll do the art for you. You know what I'm
Oh.
saying? But I don't break the law myself. I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Didn't recommend vandalizing any.
I was a vandal.
I was gonna say, Jake, I saw your tag.
I
you
was
still
the
got
reason,
your.
If you look at my
you still
tag,
got your aerosol.
yeah, they spell it with a
Yeah, I
three,
saw it.
three
It was
capitals
plain,
and a
yeah.
lowercase e because it looks like my signature. And it's not my real name. Clearly, Jake Detonator is not my real name. It was so my mum didn't know I was doing the vandalism at the bus stop. And it was bad. It was like Garfield in a baseball hat with a pair of trim trabs on, like carrying a boombox.
That's not gangster at all.
Gangster.
At all.
Not, but, you know, we were like 12 or something. We were like 11, 12 when we, you know.
Now your art style too. I also see it as very edgy.
Edgy.
Edgy. Let's say it's edgy. There's another guy, Damian Scott. And from the visual perspective, right, of the 5 elements, one of the 5 elements of hip hop is the graph writer. So when I think of your visual art, I look at it and I see the edges, that energy just comes off. And I'm like, okay.
when I was a
now
kid,
I know
it
I've
was-
seen your commercial
It
work.
was,
which
it was
is-
comics and graffiti as a kid.
Yeah.
That was it. That's my training, if you know what I mean. I mean, and the thing of doing the black book, doing the character. I was better as a character guy than I was at doing the wild style. So I quickly became the guy that did the character.
and is there a particular aesthetic? Is it something you learn, or is it just come with
We were
being
just
part
ripping
of the
off.
culture?
We were just ripping off what the Americans were doing. So it was literally, it had to have a name belt. It had to stand a certain way.
I think for me, even when I first kind of got into comics, like trying to do it as a profession, my first friends in the industry were guys like Damian Scott,
Damien, yeah.
Scotty Young, Sanford
Young's
Green. And these were all guys that we all had a similar aesthetic where thick, chunky, angular lines, definitely influenced by graffiti. And that stuff was not cool in comics at the time. When I was trying to break in, the line art styles were very realistic, overly
Right.
rendered, and so we all kind of leaned on each other, to kind of break in. So if one person got in, then they'd help the next person get in because we were all doing the same kind of stuff, and we listened to all the same music, and we had the same vibe anyways.
I remember watching Spider-Verse, and
Oh.
I said, is Khary in that? Because it looks very familiar. But we're going to leave
This-
that.
I cried in
Where
that
it-
movie. I
you did?
cried. It was like a love letter to
We're
comics
going
and
to
hip hop.
leave. Did you,
I'm
was
just
it- did
gonna
you see-
say
you saw
there were
Spider-Verse?
a
Into
few
the Spider-Verse? Oh, you
worked on
gotta
that.
see it.
Right.
That were inspired by me.
But
Right.
I looked at it and it's just like,
My influences in those movies, for sure. That's all I'm gonna say.
facts. That's all
I'm gonna say.
Yeah, this is Jake's stuff up with what is it? Crafty Cuts.
What was it? Crafty.
Crafty-
Yeah, so Charlie
yeah.
Tuna.
Charlie Tuna,
Tuna is
yeah.
a rapper from LA. He was in Jurassic 5, which were a big
Right.
group for me. And then he teamed up with a British DJ called Crafty Cut, who was more kind of like plays at Fabric and does. And we have a special guest star.
So fancy.
We have a
The
special
birthday,
guest
the
Fashionably
star.
birthday girl has arrived. This is Azmera Hammouri-Davis, y'all. Let me get your bio real quick, because I
What's your
do have
hello?
it.
Hello, hello. Greetings, everyone.
Azmera is, okay, I'm going to say aloha. Hawaii-bred, spirit-led writer, artist, and theologian, Azmera is committed to healing and self-determination. Her debut album, Young Spirit, Old Soul, explores the power of imagination in Black Palestinian girlhood to awaken critical consciousness for collective liberation.
Bam, bam.
Salute, 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 sis.
Thank you.
I know you got caught in the London traffic. I'm glad you're here. You came all the way from Hawaii.
I sure did. I came from LA, I'm not going to lie. But
Well,
still.
Hawaii, LA.
That's
I know.
right.
That's quite a
It was
flight.
that jet lag, when I tell you, waking
So-
up at 2 p.m.
So we were talking about some of the influences of hip hop culture in comics culture.
Ooh.
And one of the things that I want to ask you, Yezzi,
Me?
because you were talking about how UK rap and where is that they got to get it together.
You can't play with the Cypher.
So is it that maybe folks are starting to shift their interests? Because I see a lot of nerdcore.
Yeah.
Anime, and it's like anime rap. It's like you like anime and you rap, and then you make up these like music videos that are like anime oriented about the characters. And I'm seeing that like as a trend that really started out here and now has trickled across the pond to the States. So I think like Shadao is here somewhere, but I don't know where he's tabling because he's one of the people from the UK that's very popular with that. Do you think that maybe the interests are shifting, or like what's going on?
In regards to rapping
In regards to
itself,
what's happening with UK hip hop
yeah, I
and
mean,
comics culture, like the the factor of what's going on and the cross pollination too.
I think the beautiful thing about hip hop is, as much as there are quote unquote rules, obviously you would have seen recently with the battle between Drake and Kendrick, and people are contemplating what are the rules? Can J. Cole really tap out? Is that a thing? Do we tap out in beef? The beautiful thing where you are not essentially the country that coined the culture is that you can break some rules. Why not? And it's a beautiful thing to see that from when we're talking about garage, house, jungle, grime, UK rap, UK drill, to see animation come into it. It's not a surprise, to be honest with you. We've even got deaf rappers, in case you didn't know, yeah. I'm tapped into that world as well, and it's a thing where I wouldn't say that there is a distraction or it's going in another direction. I think it's growing. And for hip-hop to be alive for another 40 plus years, can we get an applause for hip-hop being alive for 40 plus years?
Yeah.
Like, that's not a joke, you know. A lot of people are like, nah, this is a phase.
Yeah,
it's
like
gonna
51
come and go,
now,
and it's
51.
still here. For it to keep growing, we have to be okay with changes and more subgenres growing from it. So animation wants to come into the mix when it comes to hip-hop. I'm all for it, man. Yeah.
I think it's fantastic, but it was just something that was so unexpected for me to see that. I mean, when we had Samurai Champloo, you know, we had certain things like Afro Samurai.
Boondocks.
Yeah,
That worked.
Boondocks.
Thank
you know what I
you.
mean? Like we got that.
Were you surprised though?
But it's very different when it's like anime rap. Like I want to do anime rap. It's like, huh? Like okay,
Not surprised.
why not? Go ahead.
Yeah.
But don't you think
Definitely.
with Japanese culture specifically, the first anime that was shown on British TV was a thing called Battle of the Planets, which in Japan is Gatchaman. And I think in America they called it Eagle Rider, something else as well. But it's an American. They just took this Japanese cartoon, took all the kicking out of it, all the violence, and then strapped like a sort of mixture of R2-D2 and C-3PO on it. This little droid that didn't look like it was drawn in the same style, right? I'm 7, I'm like, why does this look different? And it was an American droid that the guy had just gone make it look like Star Wars, right? So we were all running around the playground. They're like these teenagers that look like the Rolling Stones, and they transmute with the watch into like Eagle superheroes. It's amazing. It's still my favorite. When I go to Japan, I'm like, Gatchaman wa doko desu ka? But Gatchaman. And it's like, my agent was like, that's old. There's none of that stuff. Every shop had like Hello Kitty times Gatchaman, or it's still a thing. If you don't know it, check it out. It's nuts. But that's the first one that we all saw. So, you know, you talk about MF Doom or Wu-Tang, Fist of the North Star. Doom's sampling the soundtrack from that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, I think it's an age thing. So we couldn't get hold of enough Japanese stuff when I was a kid. Then suddenly it's Akira, and you only got 1 or 2 a year unless you had a friend that went to Japan. You guys that have grown up with it in Waterstones or bookshops, of course you're going to rhyme about it or dress up as it, because it became the dominant culture where it was for us, it was the rare groove. You got one, then you maybe got Ulysses 31. Is this Japanese? It looks Japanese. You know, we were getting like the translated version. So it's not till Akira comes along that the floodgates open in the UK where you could pick up.
I remember Dragon Ball specifically hit my neighborhood, and it was over after Dragon Ball. People would just be trading VHS tapes nonstop. My man, he came to my dorm room and said, "We got 6 tapes. It's 6 hours. We're gonna watch this right now." And I was like, I actually don't want to do that, not for 6 hours. But like, it was just like, there was a shift in the culture when Dragon Ball hit, and I feel like a lot of young black creators I know who are in comics now are specifically influenced by Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball changed something.
It did something. It didn't resonate with me though.
We
I
couldn't
don't
get
know.
it.
I mean, I understand Goku
I think,
and
no
all
offense,
of
I
that.
think you were the wrong generation.
Okay, I'll take that. But see, what was interesting was that like when I was a kid, because again I'm 47, it was called Japanimation.
Oh.
Yeah, and there actually were magazines and stuff called, Japanimation. So think of the early Transformers. That was anime.
I mean, Voltron was anime,
Voltron,
but we didn't know.
yeah, all of that.
what that
so we were the first like wave, and it was just that thing that was like, oh, this is really cool. But then we found the stuff like coming like straight from Japan that wasn't getting filtered through like the marketing agenda of selling toys, because that's what they couldn't sell toys directly. So that's kind of how we got into it. But my father, who is a musician, the recording studio was in Times Square. So he used to just find stuff in Times Square and be like, oh, hey, here's this, thing. And we were like, oh. So that was how we got into it. It wasn't something you could, just like hip hop was something you couldn't get easy access to.
yeah.
You had to go find it.
And you
That's
kinda
what
connected to
anime
it.
and stuff like that, you had to go find it. Then it became this thing like in the mid to late 90s, and I think that's like the main Dragon Ball era. But the historical roots of hip hop as counter narrative, I want to talk to you, about the way your work is also infused with that counter narrative.
Yeah. Where you want to start? 'Cause-
Well, I mean, you see yourself doing super heroic work in your liberation work?
You see, I love that you frame it as such, because 2 years ago at New York Comic Con, that was the first time I heard someone ask, how do you show up as a superhero in your own narrative? And I think it's a relatively straightforward question, right? Like we all want to be the heroes of our journey, the captains of our fate, if you will. And so at the time I'd be like, no, I'm not gonna own that, because who's a superhero? Like there's a sense of surrender in the work, in the craft, when you bring your full self to it, right? This is the theologian in me, so I'm gonna talk about the Imago Dei. The Creator created us to create, we believe, right? And so for me, do I see myself as a superhero in this craft? I wouldn't say I see myself as, but I see myself as a small speckle, as a part of a larger movement of those who've come before, those who are coming after. So I feel a sense of commitment to do the little bit that I can to sort of push the needle forward to say, hey, there are Black and Palestinian young girls in the world who deserve to be and to live and to thrive, which is obviously the opposite of what we're seeing writ large right now. So I won't go, I won't riff too far, but I'll just stop there.
I got you, sis. I think it's really important to talk about the intersections between the way hip hop was used as a form of liberation, right? And escape and entertainment, but also empowerment.
Right.
And I think all the work that y'all of you are doing encapsulates that in some way, whether it's the commercial work or the creative passions or the visual media with the podcast versus the speaking, the power of the voice going around, and right? We were talking about the Cypher. We started out talking about the power of the Cypher, right? And there's the verbal Cypher, right? But there's also the Cypher, right? And trying to decipher.
None of that was cool at the beginning. This is the weird thing. If you were into hip hop I'm saying like sort of Cypress Hill maybe. If you were into graph, or you were into Japanese comics and Japanese animation, or any manga, anime, it was not cool to real people. You're in a really amazing part of culture that you've got things. There was nothing like this in England specifically. San Diego was been going since the 70s, right? So being into hip hop wasn't cool. You knew it was dope. You knew it was cool, and your 6 friends that were into it were like, you knew why you were wearing your sneakers. You knew why you were wearing Dickies. You knew, whatever. The rest of the world was just going,
what's wrong with you fad
Hippity-hoppity
followers?
breakdancing. They thought it was a fad that was going to die out. Like, you probably
It's a
had
fad.
a teacher that told you, like, dressing up in cosplay was a fad that you were going to grow out of, or whatever.
Well, hip hop for me, it was like always how I connected with other people. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I grew up in a poorer neighborhood, a black neighborhood in Boston, right? And then, but I was shipped out on a bus every day to the suburbs from like third grade on. And when I first got to the suburbs, and it was an all-white school, and for me, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to connect with these people at all because I don't know anything about white people. Like I thought I was gonna be like an alien.
And they're affluent white people,
They
right?
were very rich,
Right.
yes. But like one of the first kids that I met there, he was like, "Yo, I just got this Run DMC tape. Do you want to listen to it?" And I was like, "Yo, I got that tape." I was like, "Let's talk about it." And like my entire life, even I talked about how my first friends in comics were the guys that were into hip hop. It's always been a way of me to connect with other people who, it's kind of like an escapism thing in a way where like hip hop guys to me were always superheroes. Like
Yeah.
they always were bigger than life. They were always like the coolest dudes, the most like they had the best clothes, the best cars, and I always wanted to be that person.
And the pseudonyms, right? Everybody's got a
Yeah.
name. They're not just called Dave. I know there is a rapper called Dave, but do you know what I mean? It's like they were all called
I mean, Wu-Tang to
flamboyant.
me was like the Justice League. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah.
Like it just I always wanted to embody and create characters that were like that. And the thing was that all the comics I read were mainly white characters.
Right.
So in my mind, I was like, I want to create these characters, but have them look a little more like me. And so that was kind of what my career has always been about, was that.
Yeah.
And when, my first studio, Detonator was the name of our studio in the 90s. And there were two older artists that I was like 24. And somebody had sort of said, "Have you got a studio?" And I was like, no, I just started working doing record sleeves and stuff. I was like, no, I'm thinking of getting one. I was working in my bedroom. And they said, "Oh, Carl's leaving our studio. You should get in touch." And they left me this number. And I only rang up out of like, I thought, who's gonna sit and watch me draw? And whilst I'm listening to hip hop, it'll do people's heads in. And when I went for the interview, they had a Godzilla lamp. It was like a Godzilla with a light bulb from Japan. There was like Kamen Rider masks everywhere, and they were banging Wu-Tang. And I went, right, I'm home.
Wow.
And it was the idea that I couldn't sit in a room with people because they wouldn't want to talk about Godzilla and Kamen Rider and Gatchaman and Akira and why the Wu-Tangs just mentioned Fist of the North Star and, all the stuff that I think's ill. And luckily, Ed not so much, but Woodrow was like, he's from Bromley, so that was hip-hop. He bought all the first Def Jam 12s. I'm a little bit too young. And I was like, word, you bought all the original, the red ones.
Word.
Yeah. So it was the only people I could say word to without sounding like an idiot. Do you know what I mean?
Even the way that our slang, right? Because once upon a time, like what was bad was good, right? Down is up. It's like you down.
Yeah.
So when we talk about Hey Sis UK,
Yes.
would you consider it to be like heavily influenced by like is it a hip hop podcast? Is it a podcast that hip hop is central to it, but it's not like rap life?
You know what? Hey Sis UK is, if I can just say it in its plainest form, is really putting under a microscope and then amplifying the Black British experience, because it is a very unique experience, because you grow up, I'm first generation Black British, so you kind of try and figure out, okay, who am I in England? And you see like your brothers and sisters or cousins across the pond and you're like, they seem like they got an identity, and I'm not quite, my parents are Nigerian, I'm not quite Nigerian in that sense. So then the sweet thing about hip-hop is that it's unintentionally a place of belonging, because you're like, oh, there's this culture where I can subscribe to and I can comment on and I can experience. So with Hey Sis, we talk about everything and anything, and specifically with music, we've talked about recently how we're not really happy about where UK rap is. I say a lot of times, and I like to compare, because I feel like if you do want to be the best, why wouldn't you compare yourselves to the best? So when we look at America and we look at the competitive nature that they have, not just in music, but in sports, I mean, you guys have a little league. Like, what the heck? Like, I'm looking at, like, little people playing baseball and college basketball and college football, and I'm thinking, they take it seriously. Even the cheerleading, I'm just like, wow. And don't get me wrong, we take football very seriously here. You cannot joke with us when it comes to football. But with the place of UK hip-hop, we like the fact that it can be anything we want it to be, and everyone can say, we can do better, this is how we do better. And hey sis is like, hence the term of endearment. You know when you see sis, like, hey sis, it's warm because it's from a safe space. Like, let's talk, but let's really talk, you know? You know when you talk with your friend and you got to talk to her about her new guy and you're like, listen, I love you and I want what's best for you, but sis, we got to talk. That's when you know, okay, I'm saying this from a place of love. So yeah, hey sis it's a comfortable, safe space.
One of the things I find to be most frustrating as somebody who's been part of hip-hop culture since, well, day one of my existence, but, you know, early 80s, is usually when people talk about rap life and hip-hop culture, it's usually the male perspective and the male voice. And I'll be sitting there, like, listening to somebody who's 20 years my junior try to talk about a party that I was at. But nobody is, like, asking me, and I'm like, but I was there, like, you know? And I remember when Trisha Rose had done her book on hip-hop from the academic perspective, and it wasn't as well received, you know? But then when the guys came out and were like, I'm a hip-hop scholar, and they were like, hey, come to Harvard, come here, come do this. And all of us are just like, oh, for real?
Yeah.
You know, there is this, can you talk about some of that marginalization just a little bit? We got a couple minutes.
Yeah.
But, like, what do you want to see change?
I mean, I think exactly what you just named, right? So there's a collective I'm a part of called Follow the Keepers that's committed to documenting, centering, and mining women's contributions to hip-hop in the genre's 50-year history. It's the brainchild of a dope MC, artist, conductor, producer, Akua Naru, who's been touring the world for the past 10-something years. I see snaps in the audience, because she's a brilliant human being. She came into Harvard. I met her while I was doing my graduate studies at Harvard. She was a Nasir Jones hip-hop fellow at the African American Research Center there. And she came in with the idea of, you know, we've been looking at men's contributions like day and night in this genre as if women haven't been present. But so she began to do a study of looking at the 90s, the difference between, and she can speak more to this, but specifically I'm thinking about the presence, the lack thereof of women dropping albums in the mid-90s. There was like this big fall off, and she's like, what happened, what took place? As a woman who produces her music, who writes her music, who's been independent, and who's got a lot of love here in Europe, but not necessarily in the States where she's from, it was important to me to say, hey, how can we breathe life into this during the pandemic? So Samus, who's a dope MC, she's also a postdoc at Brown, we teamed up and said, hey, what does it mean to mine women's contributions across the landscape? So for me, I was based in Brazil before I came to Harvard, so tapping into and touching the hip-hop scene for women in Brazil was a huge sort of area that I found myself exploring and really grounding us in grassroots community organizing. How is hip-hop continuing to be a tool for women to speak on all of the forms of marginalization, the white supremacist, capitalist, imperialist patriarchy that Bell Hooks talks about. So what I hope to see is Follow the Keepers continue to be funded, continue to lift up and be able to center and amplify the voices. So I love what you're doing with Hey Sis. I'm like, yeah, that's another way in which, again, this black cultural export from the US has been able to travel. We see these global streams and flows and nude manifestations and iterations with AI come to the fore. I hope that the people who created this work, who mothered us into this work, don't get forgotten. And I love that you named Trisha Rose because, you know, people don't know that Trisha Rose literally canonized hip hop studies with Black Noise.
She sure did.
People don't know that. Go read Black Noise, right? And the hip hop wars that followed, right? We hear about again. We hear about the men who do this work.
We do.
We love the men, but tell me about Cindy Campbell, whose idea it was to host that backyard party boogie where DJ Kool Herc and whatnot did this. So I say all that to say, I think it's important that we always look around. Like when I was in the studio for my first album, again, I did that because I was like, look, I did the thing society said was acceptable. I'm getting this degree, but am I really happy? What do I really want to do? I want to challenge myself. Let me put this album together, pay for it, but also observe my experience when I'm in the studio. What does it mean that I felt free because I had a woman engineer in the space to not necessarily try to impose their idea of what I should or shouldn't or can't, speak to. Not saying that all brothers aren't able to help,
That's true. We love y'all.
But when we talk about what we just saw with the whole Diddy Cassie thing, what we talk about what happened to D Barnes with Dr. Dre, I'm still like, why was it? Let me not get on that.
Yeah, let's not.
But all I'm gonna say is, I hope that we continue to center women's experience and their contributions, not just as ornaments to be objectified, to be consumed, but as critical thinkers who really deeply engage with what it means to be human and do that through their lyrics and through their composition, through all of what they're imagining worlds. You imagine this world that we're sitting on right here, you see?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Super Cypher is one of my babies. Super Salam is the other one. That's tomorrow. Definitely, we are out of time. I want you to know that if you come to the meet and greet in Zone 1, you will get a free, I only have 20, y'all. So this is our debut issue of The Interceptor, and he is a British footballer who winds up being a superhero. And that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you for coming out. Zone 1 is where? For meet and greet zone? Connor, do you know? It's on this side. So if you can come over, we will be there. I think Khary is in Artist Alley.
I got to break out, but I'll be at Artist Alley.
He's amazing.
C13. Come through. Say what's up.
Okay.
Come hang
well,
out.
that's it, y'all. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
coming to our debut for Super Cypher. Hip hop
Shout out
geeks,
to the Incredibles.
nerds, and fans.
There's nothing more
Peace,
hip-hop
y'all.
than coming as The Incredibles.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.